I threw the deadbolt shut with my whole body, just as my brother's hand hit the other side of the door. 13 suitcases on the porch, 2 dogs barking. My mother screaming my name through the wood, and I stood there with my back against it and said out loud to no one, "No, not this time." My daughter had pneumonia. She was 2 years old, 300 miles away, breathing through a tube while a machine counted the oxygen leaving her blood. And my family had driven 6 hours to spend 2 weeks in her house, the house my sick baby was supposed to grow up in, without asking me a single question. Not how is she? Not is she going to be okay? Just have everything ready, stock the fridge, make up the big bedroom. So I locked them out. All 13 of them. And here's the part I never saw coming. The thing that finally shattered 20 years of silence wasn't the door I slammed. It was the shoebox my wife set on the kitchen table 3 days later, and the number written on the paper inside it. Before we go on, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from tonight. I love seeing how far these stories reach. And if you believe no one should ever have to choose family over their own child, hit subscribe and stay with me to the very end. The locksmith showed up at 9:14 in the morning, and I remember the exact time because I'd been staring at my phone, waiting for him like a man waiting for a verdict. "You, Ethan?" he asked, climbing out of his van. "That's me." He looked up at the house, the cedar siding I'd sanded by hand, the porch I'd rebuilt 2 summers in a row. "Nice place. You sure you want every code changed, front, back, garage, boathouse?" "Everyone," I said, "and I want them changed in the next 20 minutes. He raised an eyebrow. "Family trouble?" I almost laughed. That's the second time somebody had asked me that in 12 hours, and I still didn't have a clean answer. So I gave him the one that was true. "No," I said. "This is about a line, and it took me 42 years to draw it." He didn't ask anything else. He just got to work. "I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest. I am not a dramatic man. I'm a structural engineer. I spend my days making sure buildings don't fall down. I check load calculations 3 times. I don't slam doors, I don't raise my voice, and in 42 years of living, I had never once told my parents no, and meant it. That's what makes what I did that morning so strange even to me. But to understand why I stood on that porch watching a locksmith rekey my own house, I have to take you back 36 hours. Back to 2 in the morning, in my kitchen in Raleigh, when everything I thought I owed my family finally came due. Lily's cough had a sound I'd never heard before. It wasn't the normal toddler cough, the wet little bark that comes with every winter cold. This was deeper. It came from somewhere lower in her chest, and every time it hit her, whole small body shook with it. And then she'd pull in this thin whistling breath like she was drinking air through a straw. Megan and I had been trading off since midnight. 2 hours on, 2 hours off. Neither of us was really sleeping. "Ethan?" Megan came into the kitchen, and I could see it on her face before she said a word. "Her breathing's worse. Come feel her chest." I went into the living room. We'd made a little bed for Lily on the couch so we could sit right beside her. I put my hand on her back, and I felt it, the way her ribs were working, pulling in and out too fast, too hard, like her whole body had turned into one exhausted muscle just trying to keep her alive. "That's the retracting the doctor talked about," Megan whispered. "The pulling in under the ribs." "I know. He said if it got worse." "I know, Meg. I didn't mean for it to come out sharp. I softened it." "I know. Let's watch her another 10 minutes. If it's not better, we go." We sat on the floor beside our daughter at 2 in the morning, and we watched her breathe. That's a thing they don't tell you about being a parent. Sometimes love isn't grand. Sometimes love is just kneeling on a hardwood floor in the dark, counting your child's breaths, praying the number goes down. Lily's eyes fluttered open. She found my face, and her little hand came out from under the blanket and closed around my finger. "Daddy," she said, just a whisper, half air. "Stay. I'm right here, baby," I told her. "I'm not going anywhere." And that's when my phone lit up on the coffee table. I almost didn't look. But you know how it is, a phone lights up at 2 in the morning, and some animal part of your brain thinks emergency. I picked it up. It was the family group chat. My mother had sent a message to all of us. To me, to my brother Jason, to a dozen cousins and aunts and uncles I hadn't spoken to since Christmas. 13 of us are coming to the lake house Friday for 2 weeks. Have everything ready. Ethan, get the big bedroom made up for your father. His back is bad. Jason wants the boat in the water. Stock the fridge. I read it once. Then I read it again. I kept waiting to find it. The question. The 2 words that should have been the first thing anyone in my family said to me that night. How's Lily? They weren't there. She was in the group chat. My mother knew. I'd told all of them the day before I'd typed it out myself. Lily's been diagnosed with pneumonia. It's serious. We're watching her closely. I'd sent it into that same chat and gotten back exactly one response, a thumbs up emoji from a cousin, and then nothing. And now this. Have everything ready. Stock the fridge. Make up the big bedroom. I sat there on the floor of my living room. My daughter's fingers still wrapped around mine, her breath still whistling, and I felt something in my chest that I did not have a name for yet. Megan leaned over and read the screen. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then very quietly, Ethan, Lily's sick. We can't have 13 people up there right now. I know. That house isn't even... She stopped herself. She didn't need to finish it. We both knew whose house it was. That lake house was ours. Mine and Megan's. We'd bought it 8 years ago as a wreck, a foreclosed shell with a caved-in porch and black mold in the bathroom, and we'd poured everything we had into it. Not just money, though. God knows there was money. Weekends, vacations, every dollar we didn't spend on ourselves. I'd wired half of it myself to save on labor. Megan had stripped and stained every window frame by hand. It was going to be the place where Lily grew up, where she learned to swim, where she'd bring her own kids someday. Somewhere along the way, my family had started calling it the family lake house. Not out loud exactly, just in the way they talked about it. My mother had a key she'd asked for one just in case years ago, and I'd handed it over without a second thought, because that's who I was. Jason picked his own bedroom whenever they came, the one with the water view, and it had become his room in everybody's mind. They scheduled trips up there without asking me. They'd tell me they were coming the way you tell a hotel your reservation dates, and I had let it happen. For 8 years, I had let it happen. I'll handle it. I told Megan. Handle it how? I don't know yet. She looked at me for a long moment. She's known me 12 years. She knew exactly how this usually went. You're going to drive up there and get the house ready for them, aren't you? I didn't answer because the honest answer shamed me. Because yes, that's exactly what the old Ethan would do. That's what the old Ethan always did. My family would drop a demand in my lap at 2 in the morning and I would drop everything and go make it happen, and I would call that being a good son. But then Lily's grip tightened on my finger. Not much, just a little, just enough. Daddy, she said again. Stay. 2 years old. 2 years old, and she knew somewhere in that little body that her father was the kind of man who left. I looked at my phone. I looked at my mother's message. And for the first time in my entire life, I did not answer it the way I was supposed to. I typed one word. Okay. Then I turned the phone face down on the table. Megan was watching me. Okay, you said okay. I did. Ethan. That okay doesn't mean what she thinks it means, I said. And I didn't know it yet sitting on that floor, but I had just made the first real decision of my adult life. We took Lily to the ER at 4 a.m. Her lips hadn't turned blue, that was the one thing keeping me from complete panic, but her breathing had crossed a line I didn't want to test. The doctor at the hospital, a young woman with tired eyes and a steady voice, listened to Lily's lungs, and then looked at us and said the word that stops your heart. I want to admit her. Admit her, I repeated. Like stay here. Just for observation. Her oxygen's a little low and I'd rather watch her than send her home and worry. Pneumonia in kids this age can turn fast. This is the cautious call, not the scary one. Okay, I want you to hear that. I heard it. But you're a parent for 2 years. And somebody in scrubs says the word admit about your baby, and some part of you leaves your body and just floats up near the ceiling watching. They put her in a little room with a crib that had bars like a cage and a machine that beeped every time her oxygen dipped, and Megan curled up in the vinyl chair beside her, and I stood in the hallway and pulled out my phone. Because I realized something standing in that fluorescent hallway at 5 in the morning. My family still thought I was going to the lake house. My mother's message had gone out to 13 people. 13 people were at that moment packing suitcases, booking time off work, loading coolers, getting kids and dogs ready. All of them operating on the assumption that Ethan, good old Ethan reliable, Ethan who always says yes, was going to drive up ahead of them and get everything perfect the way he always did. And I hadn't told them any different. All I'd said was, okay. I should have called right then. I know that. Any reasonable person would have called and said, "Family, my daughter's in the hospital, the trip's off." One phone call. Clean and simple. But here's the thing. I need you to understand, and it's the thing that took me 42 years to see. I didn't believe they'd listen. I'd told them Lily had pneumonia. They planned the trip anyway. I'd told them it was serious. They asked me to stock the fridge. There was a part of me, a tired, aching, finally honest part, that knew if I called and said, "Don't come," they would come anyway. They would say I was overreacting. They would say the lake air would be good for the baby. They would say family sticks together in hard times, which sounds beautiful, until you realize what they meant was that my hard time was their vacation. I put the phone away without calling. I went back into the room. Megan looked up. "Who were you texting?" "Nobody. Trying to figure something out." She studied me. "Ethan, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that in 20 years I have never once made my family hear the word no, and I'm thinking about why that is." She reached out and took my hand. "Because you were afraid they'd stop loving you." I didn't say anything. Because she was right, and there are true things that are hard to hear even from the person you love most. "Ethan," she said, "let me tell you something, and I need you to really hear it. When we started dating, my mother told me one thing about your family. She met them at that first barbecue, remember? And on the drive home, she said, 'Those people don't have a son. They have an employee.'" Meg, I got mad at her. I defended them. I said you loved helping, and you do. That's the beautiful thing about you. It's why I married you. But somewhere along the line, they stopped seeing the love and started seeing the labor. They stopped saying thank you. When was the last time anyone in your family said thank you? I opened my mouth to answer, and I couldn't think of one. I stood in that hospital room, my daughter asleep in a cage crib with a clip on her toe, measuring how much air she could pull into her lungs, and I tried to remember the last time my mother, my father, or my brother had said thank you to me, and I could not do it. I could remember the loans. $40,000 to Jason when his business went under money, out of my and Megan's account money we'd set aside for Lily's future. He'd never paid back a dime, and worse, he'd never mentioned it again, like it had evaporated. I could remember the week I'd spent re-roofing my parents' house in July, heat the week Megan and I had booked for our anniversary canceled without a fight, because Dad's back was bad, and who else is going to do it? I could remember 100 smaller things, rides to the airport, furniture moved, taxes done, cars fixed, and not one thank you that I could put my finger on. I always told myself that's just what family is, I said quietly. You don't keep score with family. No, Megan said. You don't keep score with family, but family doesn't run up a tab and then hand you the bill for the privilege either. I drove up to the lake house that afternoon. I need you to understand why, because it's the part people get wrong when I tell this story. They think I drove up there to confront my family. I didn't. My family wasn't even there yet. They weren't coming until Friday, and this was Wednesday. I drove up because the house was empty, and my mother had a key, and I could not stand the thought of 13 people walking into the place my sick daughter was supposed to grow up in and treating it like a rental they'd never have to answer for. 5 hours on the interstate. 5 hours alone with my own head. And the whole way up my phone kept buzzing. Not one message asked about Lily. Not one. Ethan, don't forget Dad needs the downstairs bedroom. Stairs are hard on his knees. Can you make sure the boat's gassed up? Jason wants to take the kids out Saturday. Aunt Carol's bringing her 2 dogs. Make sure the gate's shut. Did you stock the fridge yet? We've got a lot of mouths. 13 people. 2 weeks. And I was the man who was supposed to make it all appear like magic, while my child fought for breath 300 miles away. I pulled over at a gas station somewhere around hour 3 because my hands were shaking and I didn't trust myself on the road. I sat in the parking lot and I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring. Ethan, good. Did you get the list I sent? I want to add. Jason says the kids want those little popsicles, the ones with the... Mom? 2 colors, you know the ones. And your father wants the good coffee, not the... Mom, Lily's in the hospital. There was a pause. And I want to be fair to my mother. There was a pause. For half a second, I let myself believe the pause meant something. That the woman who raised me was in there somewhere. And the news had landed, and any moment now she'd say, "Oh my God, is she okay? What do you need? We're canceling everything." Well, my mother said, hospitals are very good with these things now. She'll be fine. Kids get sick, Ethan. It's how they build up their immune systems. A beat. So, did you get the popsicles? I closed my eyes. Mom, I'm not going to be at the house for you all this trip. Lily's sick. I need to be with my family. You are with your family. We're your family. Ethan, we've been planning this for weeks. You planned it for weeks. Nobody asked me. It's the lake house. It's for everybody. And there it was. The whole thing in one sentence. It's for everybody. As if the 8 years and the money and the mold I'd scraped out of the walls with my own hands meant that the house belonged to whoever showed up with a suitcase and a sense of entitlement. It's not for everybody, Mom, I said, and my voice was very quiet and very calm, and I did not recognize it as my own. It's Megan's and mine, and my daughter is sick, and I'm asking you to postpone. We can't postpone. People have taken off work. Aunt Carol drove up from Florida already. She's halfway. Ethan, you are being incredibly selfish right now. Selfish. That word. From my mother. About me. On the day I told her my 2-year-old was in a hospital crib, something in me went very still. Okay, Mom, I said. I understand. Good. So you'll have it ready by Friday. I'll take care of it, I said. Which was true. It just didn't mean what she thought it meant. There it was, again, the second okay that wasn't an okay at all. I hung up. I sat in that gas station parking lot for a long time, and then I did something I hadn't done since I was a boy. I cried. Not from sadness exactly. From something clearing, like a fever breaking, like a fog lifting off water and showing you the shape of the shore that had been there the whole time. I called Megan. How is she? Sats came up a little, Megan said. She ate some applesauce. She asked for you. A pause. Where are you? About 2 hours out. Ethan, did you call your mom? I did. And, I told her, all of it. The pause that meant nothing. The popsicles. The word selfish. Megan was quiet on the other end, and then she said something I've thought about every day since. You know what the worst part is? It's not that they're cruel. Your family isn't cruel, Ethan. It's that after everything you've given them, it genuinely does not occur to them that you have a limit. You've never shown them one. To them, you're not a person with a breaking point. You're a resource. And you can't be angry at a well for being empty until the well finally says no. So what do? You already know, she said. You've known since 2 o'clock this morning. You just needed to hear yourself say it out loud. I got back on the highway, and I drove the last 2 hours not toward my family's vacation, but toward the first hard line of my entire life. I got to the lake house a little before 8 that evening. I let myself in. I stood in the front hall of the house Megan and I had built out of a ruin, and I looked around at it, and I tried to see it the way my family saw it. They saw a free place to stay, a view they didn't pay for, a fridge somebody else stocked, A boat somebody else gassed up. Bedrooms they claimed like homesteaders. A caretaker named Ethan, who'd drive 5 hours to fluff the pillows and vanish before he got in the way of the fun. They did not see a home. They did not see the 2 years of anniversaries we'd skipped to afford it. They did not see Megan on her knees, staining window frames while 8 months pregnant with Lily. They did not see the place a little girl was supposed to grow up. I sat down at the kitchen table. The same table where, in a different version of this story, the version that had been my whole life, up until that night, I would have already started making the beds. Instead, I took out my phone, and I looked up locksmiths, and I found one who could come first thing in the morning. I did not do it out of rage. I want to be honest about that, because rage would have been easier to explain. Rage burns out. What I felt was colder, and much older, and much more permanent. It was the thing you feel when you finally understand that no amount of giving is ever going to be enough, because the people taking have decided your giving is simply the natural order of the world. I called the locksmith's after-hours line and left a message. I need every lock changed on a property. Front back garage boathouse. Every code. Tomorrow morning as early as you can. It's urgent. Then I called Megan back. I did it, I said. I'm doing it. Locksmith comes at 9. I expected her to talk me out of it. Some old part of me wanted her to, so I'd have an excuse to go back to being the man I'd always been. He was easier to be. He never had to feel this. But Megan didn't talk me out of it. She said one thing, and it's the thing I carried into the next morning, and it's the thing I carry still. Ethan, she said, for 8 years you've made everyone in that family feel safe by making yourself disappear. Tomorrow you're going to find out who actually loves you and who just loved what you gave them. A breath. And no matter what happens, no matter who screams, Lily and I are on the right side of that door. You come home to us. I told her I loved her. I told her to kiss Lily for me. I hung up. And I sat alone in the dark kitchen of the house I'd built, listening to the water move against the dock outside, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I did not feel guilty. I felt like a father. That was Wednesday night. The locksmith came Thursday morning at 9:14 and asked me if it was family trouble, and I told him no. I told him it was a line, and it took me 42 years to draw it. He rekeyed every door and reset every code by 10. My family was arriving the next afternoon, 13 of them, 3 cars, suitcases and coolers and kids and 2 dogs. And not one of them had any idea that the man they'd counted on his whole life to open every door had at long last decided to close one. The locksmith's van pulled out of the driveway at 10:03, and I stood on the porch and watched the taillights disappear around the bend, and then I was alone with what I'd done. For a long minute, I didn't move. I just held the new set of keys in my hand, and they felt heavier than keys should feel, like they were made of something denser than metal. 4 keys. Front back garage boathouse. Every lock in the house I'd built. And for the first time in 8 years, my mother didn't have a copy of any of them. I went inside, and I sat down at the kitchen table, and I called Megan. It's done, I said. All of it. Every lock, every code. He's gone. There was a silence on the line, and in that silence, I could hear the hospital behind her, that soft electronic beeping, the sound that had become the whole background of our lives in the last 36 hours. How does it feel? She asked. I thought about lying. I thought about saying good, strong, right. But this was Megan. It feels like I'm going to throw up, I said. She laughed, but it was gentle. That's your body telling you you did something you've never done before. That's not guilt, Ethan. That's just new. How's Lily? Sats are holding at 94. The morning doctor came by, different one older guy, kind eyes. He said the antibiotics are doing exactly what they're supposed to. He wants her one more night for observation. And then, if she keeps eating and her numbers stay up, we go home tomorrow. Home tomorrow. I closed my eyes and let those 2 words hold me up. Did she ask for me? Ethan, she asks for you every 20 minutes. I've told her Daddy's coming so many times, she started telling me. She points at the door and says, "Daddy, come." Something cracked open in my chest, and I had to press my knuckles against my mouth to keep from making a sound. "I'll be there tomorrow afternoon. I have to be here for this first. I have to be here when they show up, Meg. I can't do this over the phone." "I know," she said. "I know you do." We hung up, and I looked at the clock on the microwave. 10:19 in the morning. My family was arriving the next afternoon. I had roughly 24 hours to sit in this house and decide exactly what kind of man was going to be standing on the porch when they got here. I made coffee. I don't even remember drinking it. What I remember is the phone buzzing on the table, over and over that group chat, lighting up like a slot machine that only ever paid out demands. "Ethan, did you gas up the boat? Ethan, Carol needs to know if the guest bathroom has a hairdryer. Ethan, the kids want to know if the paddleboards are still in the boathouse." I watched them come in one after another, and not a single one of them, not one carried my daughter's name. I had told them. I had said the word hospital to my own mother's face not 18 hours earlier, and here was the family chat humming along about hairdryers and paddleboards like I'd never said anything at all. And that was the moment, sitting at that table at 10:30 in the morning, that I understood something that changed the shape of everything. It wasn't that they were choosing the vacation over Lily. It was worse than that. In their minds, there was nothing to choose. Lily's illness and their vacation existed in two completely separate universes, and the universe with my daughter in it simply did not have the gravity to bend the other one. My child could not compete with a paddleboard. That's not cruelty. Cruelty would almost have been easier. That's something colder. That's not seeing a person at all. I put the phone down. And instead of answering any of them, I did something I should have done years ago. I started walking through the house. Not to clean it, not to make the beds. I walked through it to count. I stood in the master bedroom, the big bedroom my mother wanted, made up for my father, and I remembered that Megan and I had never once slept in it as the owners we were. Every time we came up, my parents took it, and we took the small room by the stairs, and I'd told myself that was just being a good host. I stood in Jason's room, the one everybody called Jason's room, with the water view, and I remembered I'd installed those windows myself in October. My hands so cold I could barely hold the caulk gun, and my brother had claimed the room the very first weekend it was done, and never once looked back. Room by room I walked through my own house, and I finally saw it. Not a home my family loved, a hotel they'd stopped paying for. At 11:47 my phone rang. Not the chat. A call. Jason. I let it ring 3 times while I decided who was going to answer it. The old Ethan, or whoever I'd become at 9:14 that morning. Then I picked up. "Hey," I said. "Little brother." Jason's voice was easy warm, the voice he used when he wanted something and had already decided he was going to get it. "You up at the lake?" "I am." Good. "Listen, do me a favor. Throw the boat in the water tonight so it's ready to go. Saturday, the kids are dying to... Jason. Get out on it. And check the trailer lights while you're at it. One of them was flickering last... Jason." I said it harder the second time, and it stopped him. "Lily's in the hospital." A pause, shorter than my mother's even. "Yeah, Mom said she had a cold or something. Kids bounce back, man. So the boat..." "It's not a cold, it's pneumonia. She's on oxygen. They admitted her." "Okay, well, that's rough. I'm sorry to hear that." And he said it the way you'd say it to a coworker whose car got dinged in the parking lot. Then, without so much as a breath, "So, can you get the boat in tonight or not? And I want you to understand, this is the man I gave $40,000 to. $40,000 out of my daughter's future. When his business went under money, he never paid back, never mentioned again. Like it had simply been the natural flow of water downhill from the son who had extra to the son who didn't. This is the man who was at that exact moment more concerned about a flickering trailer light than about whether his niece could breathe. "No, Jason," I said. "I'm not putting the boat in. Come on, it takes you 15 minutes. I'm not putting the boat in, and I need you to hear the rest of what I'm about to say. Don't come Friday. The trip's off. Lily's sick, this is our house, and I need everybody to stay home. The warmth left his voice like a light switching off. You're not serious. I'm completely serious. Ethan Aunt Carol drove up from Florida. She's already in a hotel outside Asheville. Mom and Dad took 2 weeks off. The Hendersons rearranged their whole... I didn't invite any of them, Jason. Mom announced it. In a group text. At 2 in the morning. Nobody asked me if it worked. Nobody asked me anything. Because it's the lake house, he said. And there it was again, that same sentence, like the whole family had been handed the same script. It's for family. You don't get to just cancel on everybody because your kid's got a cough. I stood up. I don't know why. Something in me just wouldn't stay sitting for that sentence. It's pneumonia. Whatever it is, you're overreacting. You always do this. You get all intense about stuff. It'll blow over. She'll be fine. And we're still coming Friday because the plans are made. He said it like a man laying down a winning card. So do us all a favor and gas up the boat. And here's the thing. 6 months earlier, a year earlier, any other time in my entire life that sentence, the plans are made, would have ended the conversation. Because in my family, the plans being made was a law of physics. Once a plan existed, my only job was to make it come true. My feelings, my schedule, my sick daughter, none of it had ever been strong enough to move a plan. But I wasn't at that table anymore. I was standing up. And a man who's standing up says different things than a man who's sitting down. Jason, I said very quietly, you have a key to this house. Yeah, course I do. Try it Friday. And I hung up. I put the phone on the counter, and I realized my heart was going like I'd sprinted a mile. I had never not once in 42 years hung up on my brother. I'd swallowed 1,000 things from that man. I'd loaned him money and watched him buy a bass boat with it. I'd covered for him with our parents. I'd been the reliable one, the steady one, the one who cleaned up after the golden one, and I had never so much as raised my voice. Try it Friday. I'd actually said that. I laughed, out loud alone in the kitchen. It scared me a little, that laugh. It was the laugh of a man stepping off a ledge and discovering halfway down that he could fly. The phone started going off again immediately. Jason had clearly reported to command. The group chat exploded. I watched the little bubbles stack up. Ethan, call your mother right now. What is this Jason is telling us about the locks? You changed the locks. Ethan, this is insane over a cold. Your father is very upset. I turned the phone face down. And then, because I knew if I kept watching it, I'd start explaining myself, and explaining myself was the oldest chain I wore, I did something better. I put on my jacket, and I walked down to the dock, and I left the phone in the house. I sat on the end of my own dock, over the water I'd bought and never really owned, and I let the phone scream into an empty kitchen for an hour. When I came back inside at 1:15, there were 41 messages and 6 missed calls. And 1 voicemail from my father. I stood in the kitchen, and I stared at that little red badge. My father almost never called. My father was a man of the previous century, a man who believed feelings were a kind of weakness you kept in the garage, and in 42 years, I could count on my hands the number of times he'd called me directly, instead of routing everything through my mother. A voicemail from Thomas Walker was an event. A voicemail from Thomas Walker was a thunderclap. I pressed play, and I put it on speaker, and I set the phone on the counter and stepped back from it like it might bite. Ethan. His voice filled the empty kitchen, low and flat and cold as a January lake. I don't know what's gotten into you. Your mother is beside herself. She's been crying since noon. A pause, and I could hear him breathing that heavy, careful breathing of a man choosing to be very calm because he's actually furious. We raised you better than this. You do not treat your family like this. You do not lock your mother out of a house. I don't care what's going on with the baby children get sick, they get better, and it does not give you the right to humiliate this family in front of everyone. Another pause. You have until Friday to fix this. Change the locks back, apologize to your mother, and we'll forget this ever happened. But if we drive up there and that door doesn't open, Ethan, you are not going to like what comes after. And then quieter, the knife under the coat. "You've always been the good one. Don't throw that away over a tantrum." The message ended, and I stood in that kitchen 42 years old, a grown man with a wife and a child and a career and a mortgage, and I felt myself shrinking. I felt myself getting smaller and younger, felt the years peeling backward off me until I was 10 years old again, and my father was standing in a doorway with that same voice, and every cell in my body wanted to do what it had always done. Fix it, smooth it, apologize, make Daddy stop being angry. Change the locks back and say I'm sorry, and be the good one, because being the good one was the only currency I'd ever had with that man, the only thing that had ever bought me his approval. And here he was telling me I was about to spend it all on a tantrum. My thumb was actually moving toward the callback button. I want to be honest about that. My hand all on its own was reaching to call my father back and start apologizing. That's how deep it went. That's how many years of training were wired into me. And then my phone lit up with a photo. Megan. A picture from the hospital. Lily, awake, sitting up in that awful cage crib, the oxygen line taped to her cheek, her hair a wreck, holding a little cup of applesauce in both hands, and looking straight at the camera. And under it, Megan had typed, "She wanted to send Daddy a picture. She picked this face herself. She's telling everyone the tube is her dragon nose." Dragon nose. My 2-year-old on oxygen with a tube taped to her face had decided she was a dragon, and my father's voice was still hanging in the air of that kitchen. Children get sick, they get better, it doesn't give you the right. And I looked at the picture of my daughter's dragon nose, and the 10-year-old inside me stood up off the floor and grew back into a man. I did not call my father back. Instead, I sat down and I typed to my father the longest thing I had said to him in years, and I typed it slowly, and I did not soften a single word. "Dad, Lily has pneumonia. She's on oxygen in a hospital crib. That is not a cold, and it is not a tantrum. Nobody asked me if 13 people could stay in my house for 2 weeks. Mom announced it. When I said my daughter was sick, the family's response was to ask me to stock the fridge. I changed the locks because for the first time in my life, I am putting my child ahead of everyone's comfort, including yours. The trip is off. If you drive up, the door will not open, and that is my choice to make in my own house. I love you. But this is not a tantrum. This is a line. I read it 4 times. I took out the word love once, and then I put it back because it was true, and I didn't want to punish him, I just wanted to stop disappearing. Then I hit send. 1:41 in the afternoon. I set the phone down, and I waited for the sky to fall. It didn't. Not right away. For almost 20 minutes there was nothing, and that nothing was its own kind of terror, because in my family, silence from my father was the sound of a decision being made about you. At 2:04 the reply came. 1 line. "We'll see you Friday." That was it. Not a rebuttal, not a fight. Just a man who had heard the word no from his son for the first time in 4 decades and had decided simply that it didn't apply to him. "We'll see you Friday." As if I'd said nothing at all. As if the locks were a rumor. As if his son's line were a thing you could just walk over on your way to the boat. And that right there was the moment I stopped being scared and started being clear. Because there is a specific feeling that comes when you finally fully understand that the people you've spent your life trying to please have simply never been listening. It doesn't feel like anger. It feels like the floor going solid under your feet. It feels like the end of hope and the strange peace on the other side of it. They were coming. Of course they were coming. I'd told them the truth, the whole truth, and my father had answered, "We'll see you Friday." There was nothing left to say and nothing left to fix. All that was left was to be standing there when they arrived. I called Megan, and I read her both messages, mine to my dad, and his 4 words back. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "So they're really coming. They're really coming. Ethan?" Her voice changed, got careful. "I need to tell you something, and I need to tell you now before Friday so you're not blindsided. When my mom said your family had an employee instead of a son, I told you that part. But I never told you what I did about it." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean what you did about it?" Do you remember the shoebox in the top of the hall closet, the blue one from those boots you never wear? Yeah. For the last 6 years, she said slowly. Every time you gave them money, every time you dropped everything and drove somewhere to fix something for them, every time you canceled a vacation, or covered a bill, or wrote a check, I wrote it down. I kept the receipts. Jason's $40,000. The roof. Your dad's truck transmission. Your mother's cruise you paid for and never got thanked for. The property taxes on their house twice. All of it. I've got the dates, the amounts, the whole thing. 6 years of it, Ethan. In the shoebox. I sat down. Why? It was all I could manage. Why would you do that? Because, Megan said, and her voice was as steady as I'd ever heard it. I knew this day was coming. I didn't know it would be Lily or pneumonia or 13 people. But I knew someday they were going to push you past what you could give. And when that day came, you were going to stand in a room and try to explain what they'd done to you, and they were going to look you in the eye and tell you that you were imagining it, that you were selfish, that you kept score. And I wanted you to have something in your hand that they could not argue with. A breath. I'm not telling you to use it. That's yours to decide. I'm telling you it exists because I'm done watching people rewrite my husband's whole life to his face. I couldn't speak. 300 miles away in a hospital my wife had been quietly building, the one thing that would make my family stop for 6 years, and she'd never said a word because she'd been waiting for me to be ready to hear it. How much? I finally said. In total. Do you know the number? There was a pause, and I heard her set the phone down, and I heard papers. And I understood she was actually looking at it, that the shoebox was there in the hospital room with her, that she'd brought it, that she'd known. Ethan, she said, it's over $200,000. The number landed in the empty kitchen like a stone dropped into the lake outside. $200,000. $200,000 of my life. My marriage, my daughter's future poured out one check and one canceled vacation at a time, into a family that when my child couldn't breathe asked me to gas up the boat. I need to see it, I said. When I come home, I need to see the box. It'll be waiting for you. And then softer. Ethan, you don't have to decide anything tonight. Tomorrow you come home to us. We get Lily out of that hospital. And then when you're ready, we figure out what Friday looks like. Together. We hung up around 3. And I spent the rest of that afternoon in a house that suddenly felt completely different to me. It wasn't a house I'd built for a family that took from me anymore. It was evidence. Every window I'd installed, every floorboard I'd laid, every dollar the shoebox knew about it, was all evidence of a man who had loved his family so much he'd let them convince him he owed them everything forever for free. Around 6, the messages started up again, a new wave softer. This time, my mother switching tactics the way she always did, from anger to injury. Ethan, I don't understand what I did to make you hate me this much. I have been crying all day. I only ever wanted the family together. After everything I've done for you. And I read that last one, after everything I've done for you, sitting on the floor of a house I'd bled for with a shoebox 300 miles away, that said in 6 years of my wife's careful handwriting exactly what everything had actually cost, and flowing in exactly which direction, and I did not answer it. I just turned off the phone. All the way off. For the first time in 8 years, I let the group chat scream into the dark with nobody listening, and I sat there in the quiet, and I thought about my daughter calling her oxygen tube a dragon nose, and I made myself a promise. Whatever happened Friday, whoever showed up, whoever screamed, whoever tried to make me small again, I was going to be a man my daughter could point at from a hospital crib and say, "Daddy, come," and know all the way down that Daddy would. Friday was 36 hours away, and this time when they tried the door, I was going to be standing right behind it. I brought Lily home on Thursday afternoon, and the first thing she did when I carried her through our front door in Raleigh was pat my cheek with her little hand and say, "Daddy came." Just like that, like she'd been keeping a list of promises men make, and I'd finally landed on the right side of it. I had to turn my face away so she wouldn't see what those 2 words did to me. Megan came in behind us with the diaper bag and the discharge papers, and tucked under her arm like it weighed nothing, a blue shoebox. "There it is," I said. "There it is." She set it on the kitchen table. "Whenever you're ready." But I wasn't ready. Not that night. That night was for Lily. We gave her a bath. We let her fall asleep between us in our own bed with her dragon nose tube gone, and her breathing finally quiet and even. And I lay there in the dark with my hand on her back, feeling it rise and fall the way a chest is supposed to. And I let myself have one full night of just being her father before I became anything else. Friday morning came gray and early. 6:15 I was up. Megan found me at the kitchen table with coffee I wasn't drinking, and the shoebox in front of me unopened. "You didn't look yet," she said. I wanted to be awake for it. She sat down across from me and slid it over. "Then look." I took the lid off. I don't know what I expected. A stack of receipts, maybe. What I got was 6 years of my life organized. Megan hadn't just thrown things in a box. There were envelopes labeled by year. There was a legal pad, and on the legal pad in her small, clean handwriting was a running column of dates and dollar amounts, and one-line descriptions, and every single line was a time I'd said yes, when everything in me should have said not like this. March. Jason. Bridge loan, $40,000. And beside it, in parentheses, in Megan's hand, never repaid, never mentioned. July roof canceled anniversary trip, $6,800, materials 1 week. Labor, Ethan. October, dad's truck transmission, $4,200. Property taxes their house, $9,100. Mom's cruise, $7,400. She told the neighbors she treated herself. Line after line after line. 2 lawn tractors. A furnace. A semester of my nephew's tuition that Jason had forgotten was mine to cover. Emergency vet bills for dogs that weren't mine. A wedding I paid a third of and wasn't in the pictures for. And at the bottom of the legal pad, underlined twice the number Megan had said to me over the phone, $211,400. I sat there and I looked at it, and the strangest thing happened. I didn't feel angry. I'd expected the number to make me furious. Instead, it made me unbearably sad because for the first time, I could see the shape of it all at once, and the shape wasn't a family. The shape was a man handing pieces of his life across a table to people who never once looked up to see what it was costing him. "You okay?" Megan asked. "No," I said honestly. "But I will be." I put the lid back on the box. "They're still coming today. My dad said we'll see you Friday." "It's Friday." "You want to go up there?" It wasn't a question, and she wasn't stopping me. That's the thing about Megan. She'd spent 6 years quietly getting me ready for a fight, and now that it was here, she wasn't going to be the one who told me to sit it out. "I have to be there when they try the door," I said. "If I'm not there, this is just a locksmith story. Some coward who changed the codes and hid 300 miles away. That's not what this is. I need to stand on that porch and say it to their faces." She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "Then go say it. Lily and I will be right here. And Ethan, take the box." I'm not going to throw money in my mother's face on a porch, Meg. I'm not saying use it. I'm saying take it. So that when they tell you you're imagining your whole life, you've got it in the truck. You don't have to open it. You just have to know it's there. She squeezed my hand. That's the difference between this time and every other time. This time you don't walk in empty-handed. I left Raleigh at 7:30. 5 hours to the lake. I kissed my daughter who was eating cut-up banana and informed me very seriously that her dragon nose had flied away. And I put the blue shoebox on the passenger seat and I drove north. I turned my phone back on somewhere around hour 2 and it nearly vibrated itself off the seat. 30-some messages overnight. I didn't read most of them. But one from my mother sent at 11 the night before stopped me at a red light and wouldn't let go. "Ethan, I keep thinking about when you were little and you'd fix things for me. The lamp, the fence, my reading glasses. You always fixed things. I don't understand when you decided to break this one instead." And I sat at that light, and I understood that my mother genuinely truly believed that. In her version, there was a good son who fixed things, and one day for no reason she could see, he'd decided to break the family. The pneumonia wasn't in her version. The $200,000 wasn't in her version. The 2 in the morning group text ordering me to stock a fridge while my baby was on oxygen, not in her version. Her whole story was my boy used to fix things, and now he won't. The light turned green. I didn't text back. There was nothing to fix in a story where I was the only broken thing. I got to the lake house at 12:40 in the afternoon. They weren't there yet. I parked the truck and I sat in it for a minute with the shoebox beside me, and then I left the box on the seat and went and stood on my own porch to wait. They came at 1:52. I heard them before I saw them. That's the thing about 13 people in 3 cars, you hear the caravan. The crunch of tires on the gravel road one after another, and then they came around the bend, and my whole body did something involuntary, some old childhood clench, and I had to plant my feet on the boards of the porch I'd built and remind myself that I was 42, that I was a father, that Lily had said Daddy came. 3 cars. My father's big Suburban in front, Jason's truck, Aunt Carol's SUV with the Florida plates, and 2 dogs already barking in the back. They pulled in and parked like they owned the driveway, which in their minds they did. Doors opened, and they poured out. My mother. My father moving slow, his hand on his back, the way he did when he wanted you to remember his back. Jason. Carol. The Hendersons. Cousins. 2 teenagers already on their phones. A little kid holding a pool, floaty shaped like a flamingo. Coolers. Suitcases. The whole vacation spilling out onto my gravel. And then they saw me standing on the porch. And everything stopped. For one long second, nobody said anything. 13 people and 2 dogs, and the only sound was the gravel settling and one dog's tags jingling. Then my mother's face broke into relief. Actual relief. "Oh, thank God he's here," she said to the group loud enough for me to hear, like my presence solved everything. "Ethan, honey, come help your father with the Mom." I didn't move off the porch. "Stop." She stopped. She blinked at me, and I watched her try to fit my one word into her story. The story where I fix things, and it didn't fit, and I saw the confusion cross her face like a cloud. Jason came around the front of his truck. "You gonna open the door or what, man? Long drive? Kid's gotta pee." "There's a gas station 8 minutes back the way you came," I said. "It has a bathroom." He laughed that easy laugh, the one that had gotten him out of everything his whole life. "Come on, Ethan. Joke's over. Unlock the house." "It's not a joke, Jason. You actually changed the locks." He said it like he was only now believing it, even though I'd told him on the phone, even though he'd told the whole family. "You seriously over a cold? It's pneumonia," my father's voice from the middle of the group. He'd stopped a few feet back, and he was looking at me with those flat, cold eyes from the voicemail, and he said the word pneumonia like it tasted bad. "Your brother says it's pneumonia, whatever it is. Ethan, we drove 5 hours. Your mother is tired. Open the door and let's not do this in front of everyone." And there it was, the real lever, the one he'd used my whole life. Not in front of everyone. Don't make a scene. Don't embarrass the family. Be the good one quietly. My father didn't care whether I obeyed him because I agreed. He only cared that I obeyed him where people could see. 6 months ago, it would have worked. The shame of 13 faces watching me would have folded me in half. Instead, I looked at all of them, and I felt the strangest calm, and I said, "That's exactly why we're doing it in front of everyone. Because for 20 years, everything got decided quietly, and quietly is how it got this bad." My father's jaw tightened. "Excuse me, Lily was admitted to the hospital Wednesday night," I said. And I made my voice carry because Carol was in the back not hearing, and the cousins were pretending to look at their phones, and I wanted every one of them to have to hear it. "My 2-year-old. On oxygen, and I want to ask all of you a question. Raise your hand if in the last 4 days you sent me a single message asking how she was doing." Silence. 13 people. Not one hand. "Raise your hand," I said, "if you texted me about the boat, the fridge, the bedrooms, the paddleboards, the hairdryer." Nobody raised a hand for that either, but they didn't have to. It was all over their faces. Jason actually looked away. "That's the whole thing," I said. Right there. That's why the door's locked. For a second, I thought it might land. I thought maybe one of them, my mother. Someone might feel the floor tilt. But my family didn't get where they were by feeling floors tilt. Oh, so this is a lesson, Jason said, and the warmth was all gone now, replaced with something uglier. This is you teaching us all a lesson. Locking out grandparents and little kids, and a woman who drove up from Florida so you can stand on your porch and feel important. You know what that is, Ethan. That's a tantrum with a lock on it. Tantrum. Same word as my father's voicemail. They'd been rehearsing. Aunt Carol drove 8 hours, my mother said, and now the tears were starting right on schedule. 8 hours, Ethan, with her hips. What am I supposed to tell her? Tell her the truth, I said. Tell her her great niece has pneumonia, and this isn't a good week. You could have called, my mother cried. You could have just called instead of locking us out like criminals. And that one almost got me, because on its surface, it was fair. I could have called. And for a half second, the old guilt reached up for my ankle. Then I remembered the phone call I did make in the gas station parking lot, and I said quietly, I did call you, Mom. Wednesday. From the road. I told you Lily was in the hospital, and you asked me if I'd bought the popsicles. The change on her face was the closest thing to a crack I saw in any of them that whole afternoon. Because she remembered. I watched her remember. The popsicles. And for 1 second, something moved behind her eyes that might have been shame. And then my father stepped forward and killed it. That's enough, he said. Ethan, this ends now. Give me a key. He put out his hand palm up, the way he'd put out his hand my whole life, and every other time in my whole life, something in me had scrambled to put what he wanted into it. Give me a key to my son's house, or so help me. You and I are done. I mean it. You lock that door on your mother today, and you don't have a father anymore. Is that what you want? And the whole caravan went silent, because this was the nuclear option, the one he'd been holding, and everyone knew it. And everyone looked at me to see the good son crumble. I looked at my father's outstretched hand. And I thought about a different hand. A little one with applesauce on it patting my cheek. Daddy came. No, I said to my father. That's not what I want. I don't want to lose you. I want you to hear me. But if the price of having a father is that my sick daughter comes second to a 2-week vacation nobody asked me about, then you're not offering me a father, Dad. You're offering me a boss. And I already have a job. His hand stayed out for a second longer. Then it closed into a fist and dropped, and I watched something happen in my father's face that I had never once seen in 42 years. He didn't have a next move. His whole life, that hand out, palm up, had been the last word. And I'd just said something after the last word, and he didn't have anything to follow it with. That was the twist none of us saw coming. Not the locked door. The moment my father ran out of leverage on his own son, Jason filled the silence because Jason couldn't stand a silence he wasn't winning. He pulled out his phone. You know what, fine. You want an audience, Ethan? I'll give you an audience. And he held the phone up, filming, panning across the porch, across me, across the crowd. Everybody's gonna see this. My brother locking his elderly parents out of the family lake house. Grandma crying in the driveway. Let's see how you like being the good one after everybody sees this. And he narrated it right there in this fake wounded voice for the camera. This is my little brother, everybody. Our parents drove 5 hours to a family trip we've done for years, and he changed the locks and won't let a 2-year-old use the bathroom. Your 2-year-old great niece, I said straight into his camera, is home in Raleigh recovering from pneumonia, Jason. That's why the house is closed. Say that part. He didn't say that part. He cut the video. But I found out later he posted it anyway, the edited version. The version with my mother's tears and none of the truth. And by that evening it had a few hundred shares and a comment section full of strangers calling me a monster. Locks his own parents out. Some people don't deserve family. Imagine doing this to the people who raised you. Not one of them knew about a hospital crib or a dragon nose or a 2 a.m. group text. Jason had made sure of that. But that was later. On the porch in the moment after he cut the camera, There was just the 13 of them, and the one of me, and a standoff. Nobody knew how to end. It was my mother who finally moved. She came toward the porch slowly up the first step, and she looked up at me with her wet face, and for a second I thought, this is it. This is where she says she's sorry. This is where my mother becomes my mother. "Ethan," she said softly. "Baby, I'm your mother. After everything I've done for you, carried you, raised, you gave you everything, you're really going to make me stand out here? After everything I've done for you," and I thought about the blue shoebox sitting on the passenger seat of my truck 40 feet away. $211,400. 6 years of Megan's careful handwriting. After everything I've done for you. I came very close in that moment to walking to the truck and getting the box and setting it down on the porch step and opening the lid and letting the number speak. It would have ended the standoff. It would have shattered my mother right there on my steps. And I didn't do it. I didn't do it because standing there looking at my crying mother, I finally understood what the box was actually for, and it wasn't this. It wasn't a weapon to win a driveway. Winning the driveway would just make me the cruel son in the video, the one the strangers online already thought I was. The box wasn't for the porch. The box was for the room. The box was for later, when there weren't 13 people and a phone camera, when it could be the truth on a table instead of a bomb on a step. So instead, I knelt down, so I was level with my mother on the step below me, and I said as gently as I have ever said anything in my life, "Mom, I love you. I'm not doing this to hurt you. There are 2 hotels 10 minutes from here. I already called, and there are rooms, and I'll pay for them tonight, all of them. Nobody's sleeping in a car. Nobody's in danger. But no one is coming into this house this week. Because this week, my daughter needs a father who's willing to be hated by his whole family for one afternoon, rather than teach her that she comes last. That's all this is. That's the whole thing." My mother stared at me, and I watched her make a choice. I watched her decide in real time whether to hear me or to stay in her story. And she chose the story. She stood up, she wiped her face, and she said in a voice gone suddenly cold and formal, a voice I'd never heard her use on me, "Your father's right. I don't think I have a son anymore." And she turned and walked back down the steps to the driveway. That should have destroyed me. A week earlier it would have. And I want to be honest, it hurt like something tearing. But underneath the hurt was that solid floor again, that terrible clarity, and a voice in me that was quiet and certain, and sounded a little like Megan, and it said, she didn't lose a son today. She lost an employee, and she'll call the employee back the second she needs something fixed. I stood up on my porch. I looked at all 13 of them gathering their coolers, loading back into their cars. My father not looking at me. Jason muttering into his phone. Carol's dogs barking my mother's back, straight and furious. "The hotels are the Lakeview and the Cedar Inn," I called out steady to no one and everyone. "I'll call ahead. Rooms are on me. Drive safe." Nobody answered. 3 car doors, then 6, then 9, slammed shut. And one after another, the caravan that had come to take 2 weeks of my house backed out of my gravel driveway and disappeared around the bend the way it had come. I stood on the porch until the last engine faded. 2:44 in the afternoon. The whole thing start to finish had taken 52 minutes. And then the quiet came down over the lake, and I was alone on the porch of the house I'd built, having just been disowned by my mother in my own driveway, holding 4 keys to 4 locks. And I did the thing I'd needed to do since Wednesday. I sat down on the top step, and I called my wife, and when she answered I said, "They're gone. It's done." I didn't open the box. And Megan was quiet for a second, and then she said, "You didn't need to. You just needed to not run." A pause. "Come home, Ethan. Your daughter's asking where her daddy went." And that after all of it, after the caravan and the camera, and my mother's back walking away from me, that was the thing that finally broke me open on the top step of my own porch. Not the losing them, the coming home. I drove home that night with the shoebox still unopened on the passenger seat, and I got to Raleigh a little after 8 and my daughter was already asleep. I stood over her crib for a long time in the dark, listening to her breathe clean, even whole, and I thought, I did that for you, and you'll never know. And that's exactly right. Megan was waiting up. She had tea. She had the shoebox's twin, the legal pad, laid out on the table, and she had news. Jason posted the video, she said. I figured he would. It's bad, Ethan. It's got about 600 shares. His caption says you locked your elderly parents and small children out in the cold and wouldn't let a 2-year-old use the bathroom. The comments are... She stopped. You don't need to read the comments. I read the comments. I shouldn't have, but I did at 11 at night at my own kitchen table. Strangers I'd never met calling me a disgrace. A monster. This is why we're in the shape we're in as a country, kids treating their parents like this. One woman wrote a whole paragraph about how she hoped I ended up in a nursing home alone. 200 people had liked it. Not one of them knew Lily's name. Not one of them knew the word pneumonia. Jason had built a whole courthouse and cast me as the defendant and forgotten to mention there'd ever been a crime. You okay? Megan asked. And here's the thing I was. 6 months earlier, this would have leveled me. The good son publicly branded the villain by his own brother to hundreds of strangers. But I looked at those comments, and then I looked down the hall toward the room where my daughter was breathing, and the comments just couldn't reach me. They were shouting about a man who didn't exist. The man they were describing had no sick child. I had a sick child. We were not the same person. I'm not going to fight it online, I said. Good. I'm not going to post the truth. I'm not going to make my own video. I'm not going to drag Lily's hospital pictures into a comment war to win points off strangers. I closed the laptop. Let him have the internet. The internet was never the room that mattered. Megan looked at me across the table, and something in her face settled, like she'd been waiting 6 years to see whether the man she married had this in him. Then what's the room that matters? The one with all of them in it, I said. And me. And the box on the table. But not yet. Not while they're humiliated and dug in. You don't tell the truth to people who are still swinging. You wait until they're tired. It turned out I didn't have to wait long. Because 3 days later, right on schedule, exactly the way the quiet voice on the porch had predicted, the family started calling the employee back. It was Tuesday, 6:40 in the evening. My phone rang. My mother. I looked at Megan. It's her. You don't have to answer. But I did answer because I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear whether 4 days of being disowned had changed anything or whether the story was still the story. Ethan. My mother's voice, and it was not the cold, formal voice from the driveway. It was the sweet voice, the lamp and fence voice. Honey, how are you? How's the baby? 4 days. It had taken 4 days and being disowned for someone to ask how the baby was, and even now I could hear that it wasn't really the question. It was the doorway to the question. Lily's doing much better, Mom. Thank you for asking. I let that sit. What do you need? A pause. Can't a mother just call her son? She can. Is that what this is? Another pause longer, and then she folded because underneath everything my mother was not built for subterfuge. It's your father. The water heater went out at the house. There's cold water everywhere in the basement, and the plumber wants $4,000, and your father says the man's a crook, and well. You always used to know about these things. You could just look at it and tell us if we're being taken. And there it was. 4 days after telling me I didn't have a mother anymore, she was calling the employee about a water heater. Not because anything had healed, because something had broken, and I was the tool you reached for when things broke. My mother's grief had lasted exactly as long as her plumbing. I want you to understand the old me would have been in the truck already. The old me would have felt the warmth of being needed again, mistaken it for being loved again, and driven 4 hours to crawl around a wet basement to earn back a family that had cast me out over a bathroom break. Instead, I sat very still, and I said, Mom, 4 days ago in my driveway, you told me you didn't have a son anymore. Do you remember saying that? Silence. I do remember, she said finally quietly. So I want to make sure I understand. Do you not have a son? Or do you have a son when the water heater breaks? Ethan, that's not fair. It's the fairest question I've ever asked you, I said, and I wasn't cruel about it. I was just done pretending I didn't see it. Because I need to know which one I am to you. A son or a repairman you're mad at. Because a son, I'll help with the water heater. Of course I will. I love you. But a repairman doesn't get told he doesn't exist, and then get called back on Tuesday. So which is it? I heard her breathing. I heard in the background my father's voice. Who is that? Is that Ethan? Tell him to just come look at the thing. And I heard my mother away from the phone say, "Give me a minute, Thomas." And that my mother telling my father to give her a minute when she'd spent 42 years giving him every minute that was new. I don't know how to do this, she said when she came back, and for the first time her voice wasn't a strategy. It was just tired and old and lost. I don't know how to be your mother in this new way you want. I only know the old way. And that cracked something in me too because it was finally almost honest. I know you don't, Mom, I said. So let me tell you the new way. There's going to be a dinner. Here at my house in 2 weeks when Lily's completely better. You, Dad, and Jason. Not the whole family. Not 13 people. Just the 4 of you who were closest to this. And I'm going to say some things, and you're going to hear them all the way through without walking out. And if you can do that, if the 3 of you can sit at my table and hear me for 1 hour, then yes. Then I'll come look at the water heater and the next thing and the next thing because that's what family does. But the hour comes first. The hearing comes first. Not the fixing. The silence on the line was so long, I thought she'd hung up. And if we don't come to the dinner? She asked. Then I hope you find a good plumber, I said. Not as a threat. As a fact, and I meant it, and she heard that I meant it. I'll talk to your father, she said, and hung up. They came. Of course they came. Not because they'd grown not yet, but because a family that has run on one person's labor for 20 years cannot actually function without him. And some animal part of them knew that the water heater was only the first of 1,000 things. And the 1,000 things all lived on the other side of my dinner table. 2 weeks later, the second Saturday, 6 o'clock in the evening. Lily was fully well running around Dragon Nose, a distant memory. Megan had made a roast. And at 6 o'clock, my parents' Suburban and Jason's truck pulled into my driveway in Raleigh, and I watched them come up my walk, and I felt that old childhood clench again, and this time I let it come and pass through me and go, because I was ready. They sat at my table, my mother tight and pale. My father, jaw-set arms, crossed the man who'd never apologized for anything in his life, sitting in his son's house under his son's roof, hating every second of it. And Jason, who'd filmed me and posted it, and let strangers call me a monster, sitting there buttering a roll like nothing had happened, because that was Jason's superpower, the total absence of a rearview mirror. We ate. Small talk, brittle, and careful. Lily charmed them because that's what she does, and I saw my mother's face soften watching her. And I let it, because that was the point. This was the child. This was who they'd asked me to put second. And then Lily went down for the night, and Megan cleared the plates, and I put my hands flat on the table and I said, okay, this is the hour. This is the part where you hear me. And I put the blue shoebox on the table. I watched 3 faces look at it. My mother puzzled. My father wary. And Jason went very slightly pale. Because Jason, being Jason, immediately understood that a box was a dangerous thing in a way the honest ones didn't. What is that? My father said. 6 years, I said. Megan kept it. Every time I gave this family money. Every time I dropped my life to fix something. Every check, every canceled trip, every loan. She wrote it all down, dates and amounts, because she knew someday we'd be sitting exactly here. And you'd tell me I was imagining my whole life, and she wanted me to have something you couldn't argue with. Oh, here we go, Jason said, leaning back. So now we're itemizing. Now it's a bill. This is real classy, Ethan, keeping a ledger on your own family. Jason? I didn't raise my voice. $40,000. March 6 years ago. Your bridge loan. You want to tell everyone at this table what you spent it on." He stopped. "Because it wasn't the bridge loan you said it was for." I said. "You told me it was to make payroll. And then 2 months later, you showed up to the lake in a new bass boat. I never said a word. For 6 years, I never said a word. So don't sit at my table and call me classless for finally saying one." The silence was enormous. My mother was looking at Jason now. My father was looking at the box. "I'm not here to collect it," I said, and I opened the lid, and I did not take anything out. I just let them see that it was full. That's the part I need you to understand. I don't want the $211,000 back. It's gone. I gave it. I'd probably give most of it again because I love you, and that's who I am. The box isn't a bill. The box is proof. Proof that when I say this, family takes and never once asked what it cost me. I'm not being dramatic. I'm not throwing a tantrum. I'm reading you the receipts. 200. My mother started and stopped and put her hand over her mouth. "Ethan, that can't be right." "It's right, Mom. Megan will show you every line. The cruise you told the neighbors you treated yourself to, that was me. The property taxes twice. Dad's transmission. Half the things you think just worked out just came together, just got handled. They got handled because I handled them, and I never told you because I didn't want you to feel like you owed me. And that was my mistake. That was the thing I did wrong for 20 years. I looked around the table. I taught you that I was bottomless. I never showed you a limit so you stopped believing I had one. And then my daughter got pneumonia, and I finally hit the bottom, and you all looked at me hitting the bottom and asked me to stock the fridge." My father hadn't said a word. He was staring at the open box, and I could see something working in his face. Some terrible arithmetic. A man who had spent his whole life believing his son helped, because that's what sons owe, suddenly holding a box that said the son had been paying a debt that was never his. "Say something, Dad," I said. He looked up, and for a second I saw the old man reach for the old weapon, the cold voice, the "you don't treat family like this," the hand out, palm up. I watched him reach for it, and then he looked at the box, and he couldn't pick it up. The weapon didn't work against the box. You can't tell a man he's imagining something when it's written down in front of him in his daughter-in-law's handwriting. "I didn't know it was that much," my father said finally. Low, rough. It wasn't an apology, but from Thomas Walker, I didn't know was practically weeping. "I knew you helped. I didn't know it was that." "You didn't know because I didn't tell you," I said. "But you also didn't ask. In 20 years, not one of you ever once asked if I could afford it. You just assumed the well was full because the well never once said no." I closed the lid of the box. Wednesday 3 weeks ago, the well said no. And instead of asking why the well finally ran dry, you drove 5 hours to stand in my driveway and call me selfish for it. And then Jason, who could not help himself, who has never in his life been able to sit inside a silence that was making him lose, said the thing that ended it. "This is insane," he said, pushing back from the table. "You're making yourself the victim because you chose to give us money. Nobody held a gun to your head, Ethan. You wanted to be the big man, the one who fixes everything, and now you want a medal and your money back." "Sit down, Jason." It wasn't me who said it. It was my father. 2 words, quiet. And my brother sat down like he'd been pushed because my father had not used that voice on Jason in 30 years. My father had never used that voice on the Golden Son. That voice had only ever been for me. And my father turned to me, and he said the thing I had waited 42 years to hear, and he said it looking right at me, which for him was harder than the words. "Your brother's wrong," my father said. "You didn't want a medal. I know you, Ethan. You never wanted a medal. You wanted us to notice." He stopped. His jaw worked. "And we didn't. Your mother's right that you used to fix things when you were little, and I think somewhere I decided that's just what you were, the one who fixes things, and I stopped seeing the rest of you." He looked down at the box, then back at me. "A man's daughter is in the hospital, and his family asks him to stock a fridge. That's—" And his voice actually caught the transmission slipping in a man who'd never once let anyone see the engine. "That's not something I can be proud of. And I've been telling everyone for 3 weeks that you were the one who did wrong. Nobody moved. My mother was crying quietly, real tears this time, not the driveway performance. Jason was staring at the table, and I realized I was crying too. "I don't need the money," I said again, my voice thick. "I never needed the money. I needed you to see me. That's all. That's the whole box. 20 years and the whole box just says see me." My father stood up. And Thomas Walker, 71 years old, who had not hugged me since I was a boy, who kept his feelings in the garage, came around the table and put his arms around his son, stiff and awkward and real, and said into my shoulder, so quiet only I could hear it, "I see you, son. God help me. I'm sorry it took this, but I see you." And I held on to my father in my own kitchen, and over his shoulder I saw Megan standing in the doorway with a dish towel pressed to her mouth, and I understood that the box she'd built for 6 years had done exactly the one thing she'd built it for. It hadn't won a fight. It had ended one. Jason left early that night before dessert, muttering something about traffic, unable to sit in a room where he'd stopped being the golden one, and I'd stopped being the fixer, because without those two roles, Jason didn't know who either of us were. He wasn't ready. Some people aren't. But my parents stayed. My mother sat with the legal pad and read every line, and every few lines she'd stop and press her hand flat on the page and say a name, a date, a memory reassembling 20 years into a shape she'd never let herself see. And near the end of the night, my mother looked up from the pad and she asked the question I'd been waiting my whole life for someone in my family to ask. Not can you fix this? Not what do you need from us? She asked, Ethan, what can we do for you? And I didn't have an answer ready because no one had ever asked it before, and I sat in my own kitchen and realized I'd have to learn how to be a person who gets asked that. You already did it, I finally said. You came. You stayed. You listened for 1 whole hour without walking out. I looked at the closed blue box on the table. That's the first thing anybody's given me in a long time. My parents left a little before 11 that night, and at the door my mother held on to me a beat longer than she ever had. And my father shook my hand and then awkwardly pulled me in for a second hug, like he was practicing a thing he'd decided to get good at before he ran out of time. And then they were gone, and the house was quiet, and Megan came and stood beside me at the window, and we watched the taillights go. You did it, she said. We did it. You built the box. You opened it at the right table. She leaned her head on my shoulder. That's the part nobody could do for you. I thought that was the end of it. I thought the dinner was the finish line. The truth told, the box closed my father's arms around me. I thought stories worked like that you have the big scene and then the credits roll. They don't. The dinner wasn't the ending. The dinner was just the first honest day. And the next morning, 7:15, my phone rang, and it was a number I didn't have saved, and I almost let it go, and I'm glad I didn't, because it was the beginning of the part I never expected. It was Aunt Carol. Carol, who'd driven 8 hours from Florida with her hips and her 2 dogs. Carol, who'd stood in my driveway 3 weeks earlier while I locked the family out. I braced for it for the next round, for another relative calling to tell me what a monster I was. Ethan, she said, I owe you a phone call, and I've been putting it off for 3 weeks because I was ashamed. I sat down. Carol, let me get it out, she said, before I lose my nerve. That day at the lake, when you asked us all to raise our hands if we'd asked about your little girl. Her voice wobbled. I've thought about that every single day since. Because I didn't raise my hand. And I have a granddaughter Lily's age, and if she were in a hospital and my family showed up wanting a vacation, I'd have done exactly what you did. Exactly. And I stood in your driveway and let Jason film you, and I said nothing. A long breath. Your brother's video, I commented on it. I want you to know I deleted my comment, and then I read the whole thread, and I saw what he'd done, cutting out the pneumonia, cutting out you offering to pay for the hotels. I was there, Ethan. I heard you offer, and he cut it. And I called him. First time I ever yelled at that boy in my life. I didn't know what to say. 3 weeks of strangers calling me a monster, and here was the aunt I'd braced against calling to say she'd seen. There's more, Carol said. After I called Jason, I called around. The family. And Ethan, a lot of them didn't know. Your mother had been telling everyone you'd locked her out for no reason. Nobody knew about the hospital. So I told them. I told all of them. And I want you to know that the story going around the family now is not the story Jason posted. The story going around now is the true one. And that was the twist I never saw coming. Not my father's arms around me I'd hoped for, that at least dreamed of it. But this. The tide of the family, the same tide that had branded me a monster in a comment section turning. Not because I'd fought for it, not because I'd posted my own video, or defended myself to a single stranger, but because one 70-year-old woman with bad hips had felt a hand she didn't raise and couldn't live with it. I hadn't won the internet. I'd just told the truth in one driveway to 13 people, and one of them had carried it the rest of the way for me. Carol, I said, and my voice broke. Thank you. Don't thank me, she said fiercely. I'm 3 weeks late. Just let me come meet the baby when she's up for it. Let me be the great aunt who showed up right even if it's late. She came the next weekend. She brought Lily a stuffed dragon because Megan had told her about the dragon nose, and Lily named it Carol, and would not be talked out of it. And my aunt cried into her own dog's fur in my living room laughing about it. That's the day I stopped believing the story was about the people I'd lost. It started being about the ones who came back correct. Jason didn't come back. Not that month, not the next. He didn't call. The video stayed up for a while, quietly dying. The strangers moving on to hate someone new, and eventually I found out later from my mother. Carol and my father together made him take it down. My father called him and said, I'm told exactly one sentence. Take down the video about your brother, or you and I are going to have the conversation you've been avoiding your whole life. And it came down that afternoon. Turns out the leverage my father had used on me for 42 years worked a lot better on the son who'd actually earned it. But Jason himself stayed gone. And I'll be honest with you, because I've been honest this whole way, that one hurt in a place the others didn't. My mother came around because she loves me under all the wiring. My father came around because he's a man who, faced with proof, could not keep lying to himself. But Jason had built his whole life on being the one who takes, while I'm the one who gives. And if that stopped being true, he didn't know what was left of him. So he chose gone. He chose the version of the story where he was fine, and I was crazy, and he went off to live in it. For a while, I grieved that. And then, about 2 months after the dinner, 9:30 on a Sunday night, my phone lit up with his name for the first time since the driveway, and my heart did something stupid and hopeful, and I answered it too fast. Ethan, Jason's voice, careful. You got a minute? Yeah, of course. So. A long pause. The transmission went out on the truck, and I know a guy, but he's quoting me 2200, and I figured you always know if a guy's ripping me off, so. And there it was. 2 months of silence, and the first words out of my brother's mouth were a transmission and a number. Not how's Lily. Not, I'm sorry I filmed you. Not I've been thinking about what you said at the table. A truck. A quote. The employee getting called back. And I want to tell you, I handled it with grace. I mostly did. But first, there was a full 3 seconds where the old Ethan surged up one last time, where every cell in my body wanted to say, sure, send me the details. I'll look at it. Because saying yes to Jason was the most worn groove in my entire soul. Instead, I took a breath and I said, Jason, is that really why you're calling? After 2 months, the first thing is a transmission. Silence. I don't know how else to call you, he said finally, and it was almost the same thing my mother had said. I only know the old way, except from Jason. It didn't have the honesty in it. It had an angle. I could hear the angle. My mother had been lost. Jason was just fishing with the only bait he'd ever used, and finding it didn't work anymore. Here's the thing, I said. I love you. You're my brother, and the door to a real relationship with me is wide open. It has been the whole time. But the door where I fix your truck and never mention the $40,000 and let you film me for strangers, that door's closed. Permanently. So if you want to come to dinner and sit down and actually say the thing you've never said, I will meet you there so fast it'll make your head spin. But I'm not your mechanic anymore, Jason, and I'm never going to be again. So that's a no on the truck. That's a no on the truck, I said, and a yes to my brother anytime he actually wants to show up. He hung up, didn't say goodbye, and I sat there with the dead phone and I waited to feel destroyed, and I didn't. I felt clean, because I finally understood the thing it had taken me 42 years in a hospital crib to learn: you cannot lose a person by refusing to be used by them. If refusing to be used is enough to make them leave, they were never with you in the first place. They were with the service. And you can grieve a service leaving, but you don't owe it your daughter's future. 6 months after the dinner, things had found a new shape. My mother called every Sunday, not with a task, just to talk, and it took her a while to learn how there were long, awkward silences at first, where she'd clearly been reaching for something for me to fix and having to catch herself. But she learned. She actually learned. At 68, my mother learned how to call her son just to hear his voice. And I don't know if you understand what a miracle that is for a person to change that late, but I watched it happen one clumsy Sunday at a time. My father started coming to Lily's things, a little music class she did on Saturdays. He'd sit in the back on a folding chair too small for him, this big stern man watching his granddaughter shake a tambourine. And one Saturday, I caught him wiping his eyes and pretending it was allergies. And I let him have the allergies, because we all get to keep one lie if it's a kind one. And the lake house. The lake house became ours again, really ours. That summer, we spent 2 weeks up there, just the three of us, and then we had my parents up for a long weekend. Invited, planned together, my mother actually asking, "Does that weekend work for you and Megan?" Like the words had always been in her mouth. And it was good. It was quiet and good. My father sat on the dock I'd built and told me it was solid work, best decking he'd seen. And from Thomas Walker, that was a love letter. And I took it as one. There was one more thing. One more twist I didn't see coming, and it's the one I think about most. It was almost a year after the locks. Lily's 3rd birthday at the lake house, a small party family and a few friends. And near the end of it, when the cake was gone and the sun was low, there was a knock at the door. It was Jason. He was alone. No wife, no kids, no phone in his hand. And he was holding an envelope. I opened the door and we stood there, and neither of us knew what to do with our faces. "I'm not staying," he said quickly. "I know I wasn't invited. He held out the envelope. "Don't open it now. Open it later. And I'm sorry, for the video, for all of it. He stopped, and his jaw did the exact thing our father's jaw does, the same slipping transmission, and I realized we were more alike than either of us had ever wanted to admit. "I've been talking to somebody, a counselor. Dad made me, sort of. And I've got a lot of it wrong, Ethan. A lot of things. And I'm not asking you to fix it. I know that's the whole thing. I'm just saying, I know." I looked at my brother standing on the porch of the house I'd locked him out of a year before, and I did the only thing there was to do. I stepped back and I opened the door wider and I said, "There's cake left. Lily'd love to see her uncle." He came in. He was stiff and quiet, and he didn't know how to be in a room where he wasn't the golden one anymore. But he came in, and Lily showed him the stuffed dragon named Carol, and he sat on the floor with her, this 48-year-old man on the floor of my lake house, and he let a 3-year-old boss him around, and I watched from the doorway, and I felt something I'd stopped expecting. Not that everything was fixed. My brother and I have a long road, and some of it we may never finish walking. But he'd knocked. For the first time in his life, Jason had shown up to give something instead of take it. And that was a start. And a start was more than I'd had a year before. I opened the envelope that night after everyone had gone to bed. Inside was a check. It was for $4,000, which I knew was every dollar he could put together, nowhere near the 40, but that wasn't the point, and we both knew it. And there was a note in my brother's terrible handwriting, and it said, "First payment. There will be others. Not because you asked, because I finally figured out what it cost you. Jay." I never cashed it. I keep it in the blue shoebox on top of all of Megan's careful pages. Because that check was never about $4,000 any more than the box was ever about $200,000. That check was my brother finally seeing the number, the real number, the one that was never measured in dollars. It was him finally raising his hand. I sat at the lake house that night with the shoebox open on my knees, and Megan came and sat beside me, and Lily was asleep down the hall, breathing clean and whole and safe. And I thought about the man I'd been a year before. The one who drove 5 hours whenever a phone lit up. The one who gave and called it love because he was too afraid of losing people to find out whether they'd stay if he ever stopped. The one who almost let his own daughter learn from watching her father that some people just come last. She'll never learn that now. That's the whole thing. That's what I bought when I turned that deadbolt with my whole body while my brother's hand hit the other side of the door. I thought I was locking my family out. I wasn't. I was locking something in. I was keeping the one promise that mattered more than every check I ever wrote. The promise a 2-year-old asked me for from a hospital crib, when she wrapped her fingers around mine and said, "Daddy, stay." People ask me sometimes if I regret it. The locks, the driveway, the year it cost, and I give them the same answer every time, and I'll give it to you now and then I'm done. I don't regret locking that door for one single second. My only regret is that I waited 42 years to learn that the people who truly love you will never once ask you to choose between them and the child you were put on this earth to protect. My family didn't die that day in the driveway. It was born there. And the man who walked out onto that porch to face 13 people and 2 dogs and a camera, that was the first day of my life. I was actually somebody's father instead of everybody's fix. I locked them out to save my daughter. And in doing it without meaning to, I finally saved myself.